What's up, everybody? Matt Kajeski here, back again with the Stokastic channel, talking some college football DFS. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. And if you're watching on podcast, listening on podcast, I should say, make sure to subscribe over there, leave a rating and review. That helps us a ton. We're also brought to you guys today by No House Advantage. They have a new first match deposit bonus up to $100, but they're providing a unique way to play player props. You can do verse the house, which is just like it sounds. You're picking the player props that they have listed, making a lineup, and then if they cash, they win. They also have pick'em contest, which is you versus a tournament of people. They have up to $25,000 prize pools in these tournaments, and oftentimes they're overlaying. So if they're not filling, they're still paying out the same amount of prizes, which can be huge for your bankroll. So make sure to check them out. Link in the video description below. All right, we'll bring you behind the glass, talk about these 4 games. December 28th, Wednesday, 4-game slate. DraftKings pricing is up, but FanDuel is not. We'll kick things off with Duke taking on Central Florida. 3.5-point spread, 62-point total. Duke, they're very slow, 117th in pace. They pass the ball 47.5% of the time. They'll enter as a favorite here. Good implied team total on them. Riley Leonard, their signal caller, he's expected to play. Very good dual threat ability. 636 yards on the ground for him. Averages 231.5 as a passer on 30 attempts. Well, I'm just looking at pricing for the first time now because DraftKings delayed it so much, but I have no idea how this relates in the context of the whole slate. We'll get a better idea as we go through all these teams, but 7,700 seems appropriate for Leonard. I'm not sure if we have any value plays or anything like that just yet. Again, DraftKings, get your pricing out faster and we can have a better idea what's going on. But Leonard seems okay to me for this. He's great mobile, so solid here. Backfield's a 3-way committee. Jalen Coleman averages the most touches per game at 11.9, but he'd been hurt through part of the season. He's also a 2-down back for the most part. He only has 1 target. He'll split time with both Jordan Waters and Jock Moore. Waters is more of your pass-catching back. He averages 11.1 touches per game, but I think Coleman's a little more likely to score touchdowns here. Ultimately, this isn't the most attractive situation because of the sheer number of backs here. It's 3 compared to 2 and 1 in some other situations. At receiver, you have Jalen Calhoun as your number 1, 73 yards per game on 7.5 targets. That target numbers jumped to 9.8 over the last 4 games. Wide receiver 2 is Jordan Moore. He's almost just as targeted as Calhoun, but he's listed as a quarterback, so you essentially can't play him on DraftKings. Showdown's different story. Samir Hagans is now the wide receiver 3 with Eli Pankol injured. His target numbers on the year, 3.7, have jumped to 6.8 over the last 4 games. So Hagans stands out as a potential cheaper pass catcher you could get to here. He's more expensive than Moore, but you can actually play him in the wide receiver spot, which is important. Tight end Nicky Dalmalin has been... I'll pull up the routes right now, but I'm not really anticipating us playing any Duke tight ends, at least at first glance. Yeah, none of them stand out whatsoever. Cole Finney should be the guy, if anyone stands out. UCF, they are, let's see, sorry, I scrolled down on accident. 28th in pace. I'll try to find a good place to put this. And they pass 44% of the time. Mikey Keene's in the portal. John Reese Plumlee's hurt. We don't know if he's playing. We don't know how healthy he is. It's a hamstring injury. When he's 100%, he's very good. Averages 201 passing yards per game on 26 attempts. He's been in and out of the lineup, so that's depressed. 841 rush yards. He probably would have hit 1,000 if he played every single game and every minute of every game. But Plumlee, he's too cheap if he's 100% healthy. We just don't know that right now. If he doesn't play, Thomas Castellanos will play here. He's mobile, but he's awful. I think you could play him based on his rushing ability, and that's it. Gus Malzahn has been a terrible coach at evaluating his own player personnel. RJ Harvey has outgained Isaiah Bowser, 761 to 756. But the carries are in favor of Bowser, 195 to 110. Bowser's essentially averaging a little more than 3 yards per carry, and RJ Harvey's actually shown explosiveness, but they continue to give Bowser the carries when games are close. In last game, Bowser had 20 carries to Harvey's 5. Just inexcusable player personnel management, but we're here to capitalize on what the coaches are actually doing. So it's hard to play Harvey right now unless you see some sort of alternate game script when Bowser's just 400 more. But I think he's a decent GPP play. Bowser's much better chance of falling in the end zone or anything like that. Receiver Ryan O'Keefe transferred. That leaves Javon Baker and Kobe Hudson as the clear 2 top pass catchers. Baker averages 7.3 targets per game. Hudson at 4.7. But Hudson saw 12 targets in that game against Tulane. He's going to play every single route now. And there's not much else to say. He's more expensive than Baker. I would rather play Baker in a vacuum. The new wide receiver 3 is Xavier Townsend. Not very active this year, but did have a 30% route rate last game. That should be up closer to 70, I would imagine here. He's the stone minimum. You can definitely play him. Tight end has been a rotation between Alec Holler and Keymore Gamble. Holler has 11 targets combined over the last 2 games, but Gamble was out. He's expected to return. Probably a committee there. Excuse me. Second game, Arkansas takes on Kansas, 69 total, 2.5-point spread in favor of Arkansas. This game is explosive on paper. Arkansas is 20th in pace, 39% pass rate, and KJ Jefferson's returning. We'll start with quarterback here. Very mobile, 510 rushing yards, 237 as a passer on just 27 attempts, so really good efficiency for Jefferson. He's just too expensive compared to Riley Leonard and John Reese Plumlee, assuming he's healthy. If there's an issue there, I mean, KJ Jefferson is a solid floor here for sure. Kansas does not play good defense. 8 yards per pass attempt allowed, nearly 5 yards per carry. Jefferson's a solid play, but I think you can find better price-adjusted options. Raheem Sanders is a back. He's an underclassman, so he can't leave unless he transfers. Nearly 1,500 rushing yards for him this year. Averaged 121 on the ground. Averaged another 21 through the air on 21 touches, a lot of 21s. AJ Green and Rashad Dubinian will only play change of pace roles unless this is a blowout or something, then they'll play more. But Sanders, 6,900, he's an excellent play. They're also down a ton of receivers, so there's a chance they just ride the run even more here. And those names at receiver, Hazelwood opted out. Trey Knox transferred. Keytron Jackson transfer. Warren Thompson transfer. That leaves just Matt Landers, who had a 21% target share this year, averaged 65 yards on 5.6 targets. But those numbers should jump without any feasible replacements here. The next man up is Bryce Stevens. He only has 12 targets and 92 yards. From there, it's Jaden Wilson. He only has 2 yards this year, only 4 targets. And then Isaiah Satini was listed as a backup. I mean, players that don't even have targets were listed as backups. I think you can get away with just playing Matt Landers, Jaden Wilson, and Bryce Stevens, to be honest. At tight end, it's probably a rotation between Hudson Henry and Nathan Bax, but I don't really see a need to get there with Jaden Wilson at the stone min here. Kansas, 108th in pace, 44.5% pass rate. Jalen Daniels is back. His stats are depressed due to injury. Averages 184 yards per game through the air on 22 attempts. Has another 404 rushing yards, but again, he only appeared in 8 games, and he missed portions of some of those. 7K, I think, is a value for Jalen Daniels. He's probably going to pop in some optimals. Arkansas, on top of being depleted on offense, they're missing 5 or 6 defenders here. They already allowed 8.4 yards per pass and 5 yards per rush. Daniels has a pretty good floor here. He's solid for tournaments. Daniel Highshaw still out, not going to play in this game. Kai Thomas did not play in their most recent game. So Devin Neal's kind of been playing a lot recently. They did recently involve Torrey Loughlin as a change of pace. Like over the last couple games, let's go through the last 4. Devin Neal had 39 touches. He had 29. Then he dropped to 16. That coincided with Torrey Loughlin getting involved. And in the last game, he had 18. So in the most recent contest, Loughlin has actually seen touch counts of 5 and now 8, actually playing a change of pace role. So Neal is solid. We just mentioned the Arkansas defense being horrific. You can definitely play Neal, but I don't think his workload is quite as good as it was early in the year. They're going to use a change of pace to some degree, it looks like, whether Thomas is back or it's Loughlin. Receiver, this team rotates a little more than other teams on the slate, but they should be fully healthy here. Luke Grimm and Lawrence Arnold are the 1 and the 2. Very little separate them. Arnold, in fact, is a little less expensive than Grimm, and he's been more efficient. 597 yards in the year to 456 for Grimm. So if I am playing a Kansas receiver, it's probably Arnold. Their number 3, Quentin Skinner, is also pretty close in price to him at 4,700. I think I'm going to try to find the 500 to get up to Arnold here. Then at tight end, they do use 12 personnel a bit. That's 2 tight ends. So Fairchild's the number 1 here. And then you're going to see some Jared Casey mixing in as well, too. I'm not really trying to play either of these guys with some value in Arkansas and other places around the slate. Just pretty low upside, and I think you could get more out of the receiver positions that we talked about at the top. Next up, Oregon takes on North Carolina, 14-point spread, 75.5 total. Oregon, the favorite, they have a monstrous, nearly 45-point implied team total overall. On the year, they were 72nd in pace, 46% pass rate. Bo Nix, the signal caller here, is returning. He's 9,400. He dealt with an ankle injury at the end of the year, but if he's fully healthy, this is about where he should be priced. 504 rush yards on the year, 282 pass yards per game, which is 31.5 attempts. North Carolina's down almost their entire secondary to the portal. They already allowed 8 yards per pass attempt. Nix is in an awesome spot here if you can afford him. Bucky Irving and Noah Whittington. Oregon, one thing we should say here, kind of reduced their committee throughout the year. Sean Dollars and Cardwell are in the portal anyway, but you didn't see a lot of Jordan James. He's actually only carried the ball in one of the last 4 games. And it's kind of been a 50-50 split between Irving and Whittington. Irving having slightly more volume, slightly more efficiency. That's reflected in price. But ultimately, with North Carolina's defense being so bad, I want to take shots on both of these guys, especially in a high-scoring game environment here. So Irving and Whittington, I think, are good GPP plays. The receivers should be pretty cut and dry. Not Terrence Ferguson. Dante Thornton entered the transfer portal, and that coincides right away with Chase Cota coming back from injury. So in the last game, we saw Oregon trot out Chase Cota and Troy Franklin as the top 2. They each had double-digit targets. Chris Hudson had been the number 2. And then when Chase Cota came back, they decided to use Hudson and Thornton in a rotation. Now with Thornton in the portal, I think Chris Hudson probably jumps back up to his normal role. And he'd been averaging 6 targets per game over the last 4. It's a pretty good role here for Hudson. Ultimately, when it comes down to price, I think Cota is still the best value. 11 targets in that return from injury. He's the cheapest of the 3. And he's very efficient too. We're talking about right behind Chris Hudson, despite missing multiple games here. Troy Franklin's the stud you're paying up for if you have the salary. From there, it's a tight end by rotation. Moliki Matavao entered the portal, but you still have Terrence Ferguson, you still have Cam McCormick, and Patrick Herbert all mixing into the game. So very much focusing on the receivers. North Carolina, they're 16th in pace, 53% pass rate. They lost their OC here. Oregon also lost their OC, but not really too impactful, I don't think. They're the underdog, but they still have a 31 implied team total, nearly on the back of this massive 75-point over-under. Drake May struggled of late, but you're buying incredibly low here. 7,900 is quite the value for Drake May, who's very mobile. 653 rush yards in the year, averages 314 as a passer on 37 attempts. Again, he struggled a bit down the stretch. Defenses started dropping 8 in coverage against Drake May, but anytime I can buy low on him, an Oregon defense, which has also been vulnerable, especially against the pass, down their number 1 corner, number 1 edge. I think we could exploit that with May. The backfield's also condensed. They lost Caleb Hood midway through the season, and they've sort of committed to Elijah Green. He's had touch counts pretty solid over the last couple games. 28 touches and 24 touches over the last 2 to be exact. Now, it hasn't been the most efficient, but at 5,700, we're talking about a guy with a pretty locked-in role here. Omarion Hampton and DJ Jones just playing as change of pace backs. At receiver, Josh Downs opted out. Antoine Green should remain the number 1 now, or I guess walk into the number 1 role. He's now at 10 targets in back-to-back games. Explosive receiver, 89 yards per game on 7.2 targets. Antoine Green's appropriately priced. There's a bit of a conundrum beyond that. DJ Jones had been the wide receiver 2 through most of the year, only averages 3.5 targets per game, but his route rate dropped in the most recent contest, and that was with Kobe Pacer and Gavin Blackwell getting involved. Now, I'm not sure which of these players is the 2, which one's the 3. If I were ranking them, DJ Jones has been more active than these players throughout the year, so I would tentatively put him 2, and then I would put Blackwell 3 based on targets. He has 33 targets to Kobe Pacer's 28. That's very slight, and honestly, Kobe Pacer, he's been more involved from a route perspective, but also over the last 4 games, you have 12 targets for Blackwell and only 5 for Pacer. We're splitting hairs here. I'm going to mix and match them, playing multiple lineups, but one of them probably pops up for a big game with Drake May here. Lastly, it's an exact 50-50% rotation at tight end between Bryson Nesbitt and Kamari Morales. Nesbitt has a 3-target edge on the year. He has 470 receiving yards to Kamari Morales' 358. That's reflected in price. I would rather take shots on the receivers than the tight ends here. More upside for playing time and targets, in my opinion. Last game, Texas Tech takes on Ole Miss, 71 total, another healthy one. 3.5-point spread in favor of Ole Miss. Both of these teams are so fast. Texas Tech 3rd in pace, Ole Miss 5th in pace. Texas Tech runs the air raid, 54% pass rate. Ole Miss is a power run-heavy scheme, 38% pass rate. Texas Tech is dealing with the transfer of Donovan Smith. Shouldn't matter a ton here. They've been starting Tyler Shugg down the stretch anyway. He's got a couple 300-yard games, and what you really need to look at with all these Texas Tech signal callers, none of them average even 200 pass yards per game. That's because they rotated them throughout most of the year. When any number of them were given the chance to play a whole game, you saw explosive ability. Morton had a pair of 300 passing yard games. Shugg has hit 300 yards. They're all pretty mobile too. Morton's been banged up, and Shugg has been hurt through most of the year. But even in limited time, they both have solid positive rushing numbers here too. Shugg is expected to start, and he'll be the guy I play more of. But if Morton ends up taking first-team reps in pregame, I think you could play him as well. I'll take some shots on these signal callers. Just know that this is risky, and they might split work again here. The backfield's also a split. Taj Brooks and SaRodorick Thompson, they're essentially dead even on the year. Brooks has a slight edge in touches, 162 to 150. But Thompson has taken over the backfield lately in their most recent game. He easily out-touched Taj Brooks. He actually finished with 25 touches, and Taj Brooks came in with 15. Now, this is ebbed and flowed throughout the year. They kind of run the hot hand. Neither are particularly good values on this slate with Ole Miss on the other side, but the total's high. I think you could throw some darts. The receiving game is really difficult to evaluate because of the air raid and raw play volume. They'll mix and match just naturally. It's hard to see receivers like playing 90 snaps when you don't necessarily need them to. But Jaron Bradley and Miles Price are the top two. They both have been playing over 80% of their routes lately. Bradley has better numbers on the year, but you actually have Miles Price averaging more targets. Price has been hurt more of the year, so the number is a bit depressed for him. But I think as far as price-adjusted value goes, he's the number one over Bradley because you get a little bit of a discount. Xavier White's the 3, pretty consistent target volume for him. He's actually the second leading receiver with 561 yards. Good target volume, good route rate for him. I think he's completely fine. And then it gets a little bit weird for him here. Nehemiah Martinez is a player we should mention here. In the most recent game, Nehemiah Martinez popped up for 8 targets, but his route rate actually wasn't quite as good. He was down at 30% of the routes, 31%. And complete opposite, you had Brady Boyd not targeted at all, but he participated in 88% of the routes. That's worth noting. The other names here, Trey Cleveland, only 5%. He basically was phased out. Louis Fungi, 16%, basically phased out. They run a rotation at tight end. Mason Tharp isn't going to play here. Baylor Cupp and Henry Teeter rotate. I think if you're ranking them, it's Price 1, Bradley 2, White 3, Brady Boyd 4, Nehemiah Martinez 5, with it being very close between the latter two. And our final team, Ole Miss, favored here, solid implied team total. Jackson Dart's a game-managing quarterback, but he's very mobile, 548 yards on the ground for him, 27 attempts per game. That's equating to 218 pass yards per game for Jackson Dart. Should be a good value, but I'm not necessarily sure you need to go there. They just will take the air out of the ball when they can. Running back Quinshon Judkins has worked pretty clearly ahead of Zach Evans lately. For good reason, to make sense. I mean, Judkins, freshman All-American, 123 rush yards per game, decent pass-catching floor. He's touched the ball an absurd at least 23 times in each of the last 4 games. He's a rock-solid play. Zach Evans will pop up for bigger games. He averages 13.5 touches per game himself. And I think you could throw a dart on him. Just sometimes when Ole Miss plays to their preferred game plan, they'll run the ball 40 times. That could be 15 for Evans, 25 for Judkins. At receiver, I don't think we're going to see any opt-outs. The top 2 are Jonathan Mingo and Malik Heath. Very close in opportunity. 79 targets for Mingo, 76 for Heath. Receiving yards, very little separates them. Heath at 834, Mingo at 808. Mingo slightly cheaper. That's how I'm going to break this tie, but I would mix and match them if you're stacking here. Jordan Watkins is the wide receiver 3, 3.9 targets per game for him. And then Dayton Wade has been the 4. One change this offense made is they went to 4 wide. around the midpoint of the season. And Dayton Wade has played at least 90% of the routes in 4 straight games. He's averaging 6.5 targets per game in that span. That's better than Watkins' 3.8. I do think that's volatile, but you could play these guys as cheap dart throws. The one thing I'd make sure is Michael Trigg is out. He was expected to miss the entire year. He came back, suited up, didn't play, then got suspended. I'm not really sure where he stands with Lane Kiffin right now, but Michael Trigg is a tight end who played a lot to start the year, then got hurt, suspended, and whatnot here. But that'll do it for the slate. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think. Hit the thumbs up button on the way out. Subscribe to the channel. Hit me up on Twitter. I'm at Matt_Kajeski. Otherwise, we'll be back for every single bowl game this week and throughout bowl season. So check out the future videos. Until then, good luck, and we'll see you guys soon.